Who were the riders who made emperors taste fear on the wind? Why did one name roll across continents like thunder? Why did the borderlands tremble before the capitals heard anything? Listen. The archive opens, and dust rises from sealed ink, and the first hoofbeat is already inside the reader's chest. You can almost hear leather creak and feel winter air cut across a plain with no shelter. On one horizon stand the European Huns, and they press the Roman world until its nerve shows. They do not need to win every battle, because they win the calendar by deciding when crisis begins. On the other horizon stand the white Huns, called the Hephthalites, and they lean into Persia and India as if mountains were only folds of cloth. They read passes like scripts and treat rivers like lines that can be crossed at will. Two empires take shape under different skies, yet both carry the same weapon before any arrow is loosed. The weapon is not a blade, but a question that cannot be answered in time. That weapon is uncertainty, and it travels faster than writers. It turns distance into pressure, and makes stillness feel temporary. It makes every road sound like a warning, and every quiet morning feel borrowed. Here's the claim. The Huns did not only break things, they redesigned the meaning of security. They made empires feel their own weight, and they exposed how slowly stone responds to speed under pressure. They turned movement into authority, and they made speed look like sovereignty. They forced courts to negotiate with the horizon and to pay for days they had not lost yet. They proved that fear can be administered and repeated until it becomes routine, and they did it without needing to hold every city they threatened. Late antiquity was full of walls and full of exhausted treasuries. Rome could command roads and cities, yet it could not command where the next strike would fall. Every garrison waited for an order that arrived after the damage was done. Persia could guard rivers and passes, yet it could not guard every valley that opens to the steppe, and each guarded pass simply pushed danger into another gap. What begins as raiding becomes a lesson in reach and timing. A confederation can appear and vanish and still rearrange the decisions of men who never saw it. The mere possibility of arrival becomes a policy problem that eats a budget from the inside. Security starts to feel like a bargain rather than a guarantee. Peace becomes a pause you purchase and pray to extend. In the West, the European Huns master shock as a craft. They move when armies are far away, and they choose moments when harvests are near. They take hostages to pin loyalties in place, and they demand gold, not as loot, but as policy. Payment becomes the cheapest kind of peace and the most expensive kind of dependence. They stage diplomacy as a silent threat, and they make access to their leaders feel like a privilege that can be revoked overnight. An envoy leaves with gifts in his hands and a knot in his stomach because he cannot tell whether he bought peace or only postponed fire. Even when camps shift beyond sight, provinces keep hearing hooves inside every rumor, and fear settles into administration as governors stockpile coin the way others stockpile grain. In the East, the Hephthalites master position as a form of rule. They understand that the road is a kingdom without walls, and they rule it by controlling passage. They hold choke points on routes of silk and salt, and they turn movement into revenue. They sit where merchants must pass, and they learn that a gate can be richer than a battlefield. They bend local kings into clients, and they call it protection, while taking the keys to the corridor. They force Persia into costly bargains, and they carry their pressure toward northern India, where wealth moves along lines that can be seized. And once a corridor is held, every ruler nearby must decide whether to resist openly or survive quietly. They do not need to burn every city to be obeyed. They only need to make the next season uncertain. Now follow the mechanism that makes both stories rhyme. First comes mobility. A camp can relocate in a night, and a capital must spend fortune simply to guess where the next wound will open. Scouts ride out and return with silence, and that silence becomes a report that multiplies fear. That guessing drains reserves and spreads armies thin across too many frontiers. Tribute then becomes a shield you purchase in advance, and a timer you reset with each payment. The effect is strategic fatigue that turns commanders into managers of anxiety. The result is delay that feels like wisdom until delay becomes habit. Second comes the raid as psychology. The blow lands once in fire, then lands again in imagination, where it keeps burning. People plan their lives around the next loss, and rumor outruns any messenger on any road. Fear recruits helpers in the dark because survival is persuasive. The effect is fragmentation across the frontier as towns look inward and allies hesitate. Leaders quarrel over blame and over reinforcements that never arrive on time. The result is bargaining without a center and an empire that speaks in many nervous voices. Third comes intimidation as administration, and fear learns routines, so violence does not need to be present every day to be obeyed. Once obedience becomes a habit, the threat can rest and still remain effective. In the West, authority gathers around access and hostages and ritual performances of dominance that make submission feel inevitable. In the East, authority gathers around passes and tolls and the power to open or close a corridor that feeds whole regions. Not a legend, a method. The effect is a new imperial grammar, where power is permission to move and permission to trade. The result is a world reorganized around bottlenecks, rather than banners. Then the names begin to blur, and chroniclers reuse labels when categories fail, and enemies prefer one terrifying word to many precise histories. That word travels faster than any horse, and it makes distant courts panic before scouts return. Over time, the European Huns fracture, when unity loses its center, and their shadow becomes warning and memory. Over time, the Hephthalites endure longer because they sit on roots and count revenue, yet they also meet limits when rivals learn the roads. Still, the lesson remains, and it is simple enough to carve into stone. When power can arrive from nowhere, the imagination becomes a battlefield, and the state pays for victory before the enemy even appears. These two Hunnic worlds rose on opposite horizons, and both rewired Eurasia by teaching empires to fear the unseen approach. They proved that speed can be sovereignty, and that tribute can be architecture built out of dread. They forced old powers to think like borderlands, and to treat tomorrow as a negotiable resource. Hold your place at the edge of the map for one more breath, and the horizon will never feel empty again for you. Next time, the archive will be opened for Sasanian Persia. If the topic interests you, stay tuned. Handin Sakunhander